All right, thanks for joining me. So I'm going to be talking today about these two gimbals here. I'm sure you've heard about them already. This is the DJI RS2 and the RSC2. This one being the bigger brother. It's a little more expensive. It's got more features. This one's a little smaller, a little less expensive. I tried out these gimbals with the Sony a7 III and the Sony a7S III. So you're going to see footage from both cameras. And full disclosure, this is a sponsored video. DJI wanted me to be among the first to give my opinion on the gimbals, so they gave them to me to try out. Okay, I want to start right off the bat by saying I wasn't a huge fan of the original DJI Ronin S or the original SC. And I'm going to talk about how some of the issues that I had with those gimbals have been addressed with these gimbals. So the first thing I want to talk about here is the weight issue, because the original Ronin S was just really heavy to me. I don't know, maybe some people are just hitting the gym harder than I am. I see it all the time in the comments, all these tough guys who never get tired with their gimbals. Well, guess what? I'm not one of them. I get tired after using a gimbal for a while, especially after doing adventurous and difficult kinds of shots that bring the gimbal further from my center of gravity. And that's the real thing you gotta watch out for with your gimbal. It's not just how much the gimbal weighs, because this one's only 25% lighter than the original Ronin S. It's where the weight is placed. So the original Ronin S had a longer handle and everything was sort of pushed up higher. There was a big bulky control box here with the joystick, but the RS2 has addressed that issue by making the whole gimbal more compact. So the bulk of the weight of the gimbal is much closer to the base, which makes it overall more comfortable to hold. You want to make sure that your gear is encouraging you to stay creative. And if the gimbal is too heavy, then you're not going to want to go for those shots that might require more physical exertion. You might walk instead of running, you might hold the gimbal low instead of raising it up high, things like that. Another problem I had with the original Ronin S and the SC was the limited follow modes that they had and the lack of controllability from the handle. There were three that were on a button, and then there was one that you had to squeeze down the trigger. That was the lock mode. You had to squeeze the trigger to keep it locked. With the Ronin S2 and the SC2, you can access 5 follow modes from the handle. There's a touchscreen on this one, and the SC2 has like a wheel jog dial configuration here with a button. So back to those follow modes, you've got pan follow, pan tilt follow, FPV mode, which is where you can pan tilt or roll, 360 roll, which is where you hold down the joystick and then it spins like this. Portrait mode for vertical video, which actually requires a different mount for your camera, so I'm not going to go into that right now. And custom mode. So custom mode allows you to choose tilt follow, roll follow, or pan follow. Any combination of those. My favorite custom mode is tilt follow only. So that's where it just tilts like this and it won't pan if you go side to side. I find it really useful for interior shots where I might want to tilt down from the ceiling as I'm walking forward. I used to always struggle with that kind of shot because the gimbal would pan a little bit to the side when I didn't want it to. It also helps, of course, when I'm tilting up from the ground. Sometimes I want to start looking straight down and then tilt up to my subject. Very difficult to do in pan tilt follow mode, very easy to do in tilt only follow mode. Now I have just one little gripe about these follow modes, which is I want lock mode to be an option on the touchscreen instead of me having to use my custom mode for lock. In other words, I have to squeeze down this trigger just like with the Ronin S if I want lock mode, otherwise I have to use my custom mode to lock it. And then I give up my tilt follow mode, so that means that every time I want to do tilt follow, I have to go in here and I have to press custom and then unpress roll and pan and then keep tilt. Like, it takes more time to do it that way. If you look at the arms of the RS2, you'll see that they're made out of carbon fiber, which is actually a first according to DJI for 3-axis gimbals. Yes, it looks very cool, but that's not the only advantage of the carbon fiber arms. First of all, it of course makes them stronger and lighter. Second of all, it makes the action a lot smoother when you go to adjust your balance. So when you loosen this latch here and then you slide it along, there's not a lot of friction there. It's actually very smooth to the touch. And for me, having balanced a lot of gimbals where I felt like I was wrestling the life out of it just to get it to move a little bit, that comes as a very welcome change. I like feeling like the gimbal's working with me instead of against me as I balance. And actually, I want to mention one more thing. There's this little wheel here to adjust your tilt balance. So you turn the wheel and the camera moves back, and then you turn the wheel the other direction, the camera moves forward. That's actually such a useful feature. I love it. I wish it was on all of the arms. I wish it wasn't just on the tilt balance, but that's the way it is. I'll take what I can get. This is not to say that balancing the RSC2 is an unpleasant experience. It just has a little bit more friction as it's sliding along. I can feel it grinding a bit instead of the ultra smooth feeling of the RS2. So if you're ultra particular about the feel of your knobs as you balance, then the RS2 definitely has a smoother feel to it. Both gimbals use a dual layer quick release plate, which means if you want to remove the camera, it's really easy to do. And the cool thing about this plate here is that it keeps your follow focus attached if you use a mechanical follow focus or whatever accessory you put here. Or if you happen to have the RavenEye mounted on the hot shoe of the camera, then you can have your follow focus and your wireless video transmission all as one unit on your camera here. But if you want the lightest configuration possible, then what you're going to want to do is slide the top lever, and then the camera comes out like this, and then you have just the camera with a very minimal base plate on the bottom. So it's good to have two ways to quickly remove the camera from the gimbal. Another important feature is the Titan stabilizing algorithm, which is DJI's upgrade to the previous generation of stabilization. It's supposed to allow you to use a 100mm equivalent lens on your gimbal and get stable results. Well, I tried them out as much as I could in real-world environments on a variety of terrains and a variety of situations, and I can say that the performance was as good as the best gimbals I've ever used. Was it perfect? Well, no gimbal's perfect. The more difficult the terrain, the more difficult the moves you do, the harder it's going to be on that gimbal. On smooth surfaces with a wide-angle lens, I got pretty much perfect results, even with the in-camera stabilization turned off. I could do pretty much any move and have no visible shake whatsoever. When I threw on longer, heavier lenses, depending on the kind of camera move I did and depending on the terrain I was walking on, I still had some shake get through, because I don't think any single arm 3-axis gimbal is ever going to be perfect. I've never used a gimbal before that didn't benefit from the in-camera stabilization. It's just a reality that you're probably going to want to smooth out some of your gimbal shots either with the camera's IBIS or warp stabilizer in post, or a little bit of both. And that's something I want to talk about here. There is a new generation of stabilization, not in the gimbal, but in the camera, that can make your gimbal shots look pretty much perfect. And that's the gyro stabilization of the Sony a7S III. Now, this isn't an a7S III review, and I already made a video about gyro stabilization, but what I found was when using the a7S III on the RSC2, the smaller of the gimbals, I could smooth out those little jitters that still got through and make it look glassy, smooth, and perfect. Even with this big 24-105 lens, and I didn't even need to increase my shutter speed to compensate, because high shutter speed is a thing that you're supposed to use with gyro stabilization if you have too much shake. So what that means to me is the gimbal is doing a really good job of taking out 96% of the shake, but that little 4% that still creeps through, I can take out with the gyro stabilization, and this is better than using warp stabilizer in post for reasons that I go into in my gyro stabilization video. Not going to talk about it here. I really liked using the a7S III on the RSC2. Let's talk about different ways you might want to hold your gimbal when you're shooting, versatile shooting options. So the RSC2 has this handle that bends in this crazy way like that, and then you can lock it off by spinning this dial here, and whatever angle you want, it will stay there. So basically you can invent different grips, different ways of holding the gimbal, and you don't have to add any accessories in order to do it. If you want your gimbal like this, then you can hold it like this, or you can do it like that, and that would be good for low angles. Plus, it helps to fold the gimbal smaller when you're packing it away for travel. So it's a dual purpose, weird, bendy handle. If you want an alternative handle for your RS2, then what you do is you take this accessory here, and then you slide it in there on the Nato clamp, lock it in, then you take your tripod feet and you screw those in like so, and then you've got yourself another handle. So you can hold it like this if you want, that might be more comfortable for you. And just like with the SC2, this is infinitely configurable. You can put this on either side and you can create whatever kind of handle you want out of it. The gimbals also come with this cell phone holder that slides right into the Nato clamp, and if you need to switch sides for whatever reason, then you can just do like that, switch it around, and boom, you got it on the other side. Next, let's talk about this little guy here. This is the RavenEye video transmission system, which is a wireless HDMI video transmitter. It slides in right here on your gimbal. Because you have a display both on your camera here and on your phone here, I used the A7S III screen for one angle and the phone for another angle. So if I was shooting and maybe I start off with a low shot and I go to a high shot, then I don't have to awkwardly try to adjust the monitor or something. I just look at one screen when the camera's low, and then when it's high, I look at the other screen. So that could be configured a number of ways. You could have this one facing to the side and this one facing forward. That way, if you're filming somebody and you're walking along them like this and then they turn, then you can turn the camera and you still see what you're shooting. For my test, the RavenEye worked really well. It was really easy to connect and it held the connection really strongly, and I didn't notice a lot of drop frames. The latency on the RavenEye seemed really minimal. I had no trouble keeping my subjects framed in my shots, even while moving at a faster speed. The image seemed very sharp. It seemed like it was about 1080p, but the Ronin app does not allow punch in to check your focus. So I couldn't just use my phone monitor to verify my focus. I had to go back to my A7S III screen and use the punch-in feature on the A7S III. Other than that, I really have no complaints about the RavenEye system. It works really well. The RavenEye unlocks another powerful feature too. This is ActiveTrack 3.0. So ActiveTrack is the touch-to-track feature that you've probably used on DJI drones before. It's also been on their gimbals for a number of generations in some form or another. But this is the first time that it's been integrated with a wireless video transmitter. And the reason that's important is because previous generations required that you put your phone on your hot shoe of your camera and then it tracks the subject via the lens on your phone. But that's not the same lens that's being used to record the scene. So your framing might not be as accurate because it's not getting information directly from the camera. So in order to get a perfect track of your subject, you need for it to be tracking based on the image that's coming out of the actual camera's lens, not the phone. So how did it actually work? I found that if I was on a wider lens and I smoothly moved in a linear direction toward my subject or away from my subject, ActiveTrack did a really good job of keeping that subject properly framed. It also did a pretty good job handling rotation around the subject too, but there's a limit there. Very, very brief obstructions, like if there's one tree branch that goes past, no problem. But if it's a bigger, thicker obstruction that obscures your subject for longer than that, then it will lose the ActiveTrack and it might start randomly trying to track some other object in the scene instead. One feature I'd really like them to add to ActiveTrack, which should be fairly easy to implement, is the ability to choose which axes to track. So right now it will track pan and tilt and you can't change that. But I'd like it if I could make it only track the pan. So maybe the subject is moving across frame and I don't want the gimbal to tilt up a little bit by accident or tilt down. I just want a smooth pan across. I'd like to be able to choose just the pan axis for my ActiveTrack, or the tilt axis or the roll axis or any combination of those. But even as it is, it's still very useful, especially if you're doing something like a hyperlapse where you just need to keep an object centered in the frame the whole time, and it's something high contrast. One really cool thing about ActiveTrack is you can see what's being tracked from the LCD screen on the gimbal. You actually get a little video display of what the RavenEye is sending back to the gimbal. So that's cool, but you can't touch to control the ActiveTrack, just so you know. You can't touch to find your subject. What you can do instead is just hit the trigger once, and then it will automatically select whatever's in the center and it will detect faces and try to track based on that. That's one aspect of ActiveTrack that I didn't personally try out, but it could come in handy if you're trying to work light and fast and you don't always want to have your phone right here on your gimbal. That aspect of ActiveTrack does not work at all on the RSC2 because it doesn't have the touchscreen, it doesn't have that kind of LCD display. So you have to use your phone in order for the ActiveTrack to work on the RSC2. And just to make it perfectly clear, ActiveTrack does not work at all if you don't have the RavenEye system. So if you don't buy that optional attachment, you cannot use ActiveTrack with these gimbals. Both these gimbals have the same ability to control your camera's focus, and it's a really interesting innovation. I didn't get too much chance to try it out in the real world, unfortunately. So how it works is it has this wheel in front that you just turn with your finger. So instead of having to use one of your hands to turn a wheel on the side like this, you have a wheel here, which means you can keep both hands on the gimbal, because a lot of the time you need both hands on that gimbal to get a decently steady shot. So there's another aspect that I find really appealing about this design here, which is you can sort of use muscle memory. Now what I mean by that is you can remember approximately where your knuckle is as you turn this. So you say, okay, mark 1 is maybe here, my fingers are on there, and mark 2, my finger's gonna go to about here. And you just kind of remember where your knuckle is. And then as you're shooting, you can rack from point A to point B just by muscle memory, and of course looking at the monitor to verify that you're hitting the right marks. You can use the focus motor externally, which I don't have attached right now, or you can connect a USB cable to some cameras and control the lens's focus electronically. Now what surprised me about this is that I was able to control the focus of my Sony a7 III via USB electronically with no focus motor. For the first time with any gimbal that I've used so far, I could just turn this wheel and it controlled the electronic focus of the motor. The performance was not quite perfect though. It was a little bit steppy, I guess, at certain speeds. Like sometimes the focus would seem to jump up in steps rather than being a gradual, smooth rack. But other times when I focused slower, I didn't really notice the stepping action. And I didn't have enough time to really test this out in the field and give it a good workout, but it's a very promising feature. And DJI told me that in a future upgrade to the firmware, they're planning on supporting electronic focus with the Sony a7S III as well. So that's not here yet, but it's on the way. A feature that's unique to the RS2 is the ability to control the creative modes, which are the time lapse, the motion lapse, the panorama, and the time tunnel from the handle of the gimbal. Now I didn't use all these modes, just didn't have time to try them out, but what I was specifically interested in was trying out the track feature, which is the sort of motion time-lapse tracking feature. So if you press track and then you move the camera, you can set your start position like this, then you set that as your first waypoint, and then you move the camera to another position. Let's say I want to take it to here, and then you add a point, and that's your end position. Then you set your movement duration. I'm going to make mine 6 seconds, and you confirm it. You hit start, moves back to the original position, and as soon as it hits that position, it will start moving like that. So if you wanted to create an automated movement that freed you from having to worry about having to perfectly pan the gimbal while you walk or whatever, then you can just do that and program it, and you can repeat it as many times as you need. So if you're doing multiple takes of the same shot, then you can just keep repeating this movement on the gimbal over and over and over. Just take it back to the first position, just like that. One thing I think they could improve about this feature is adding an ease in and an ease out control to the movement. Because as it is right now, it's not a rough start and stop, it's just not as smooth as it could be. And there's no way to enhance the smoothness of the start of the movement or of the end of the movement. So basically what I'm asking for is a simple smoothness control so that it will have the same smooth start and smooth stop that it would have if I was controlling it by hand. I just want to quickly touch on how the battery works with these gimbals because it's pretty important to know. The RS2 has a removable handle. The battery is in the handle, but the battery itself is not removable, just like with the original Ronin S, which means that if this battery goes dead, then your shoot is over unless you have a spare handle lying around. Now, the battery lasts for a very long time. I'd say it lasts for about 12 hours, easily a full day of shooting, but if you're unable to recharge overnight, you need to keep that in mind, and you might want to even purchase an extra battery handle. I'm not sure if DJI sells that, I haven't researched it, but if they do, it's a good purchase to make. The handle on the RSC2 does not come off, meaning that this is your one and only battery for this gimbal. So, you need to make sure that you have a full charge at the beginning of each day's shoot. But there is a silver lining to this, which is that it supports fast charging. So it's supposed to first of all give you 14 hours of battery life right out the gate if it's fully charged. And if you need to top up the charge, it should only take an hour for it to go from completely depleted to 80% full. And then after an hour and a half of total charging, you should be back at a completely full battery. So if you're really worried about your battery dying during an extra long shoot, then I'd suggest bringing along an external power bank and plugging it in whenever you take a break. One more advantage that the RS2 has over the RSC2 is that you can remove the handle of the RS2 like that, and then you can mount the gimbal on a different kind of base. DJI calls this a universal base mount, which means that it's going to be compatible with a slew of alternative mounting solutions, such as a car mount, a jib mount, a zipline mount I think is on the way, different kinds of handle configurations. This universal base mount system is only on the RS2, it's not on the RSC2, and that may be a deciding factor for you if you do a lot of vehicle mounts and things like that. The gimbals come with these travel bags, which are really cool. The RS2 has a removable handle, so it fits easily in this one, and the RSC2 folds, so it can fit perfectly in this one. The handle does not come off of the RSC2. Now that said, I found myself using the travel bags less and less the more I went out, because the bags take up some space. And when I'm using a small backpack like this one, this is the Moment Travel Wear backpack, the travel bags that the gimbals come in are actually a little bit bulky to fit in here. And yes, they do give you extra protection, but the bag itself gives some protection. And the gimbals fold down so well without the bags, I feel like I'd rather use the extra space in my backpack for more lenses or accessories rather than just using the padded bag with a ton of extra protection for the gimbal. If you want to baby your gear and keep it in perfect condition, then those bags that they come with are perfect for it. Okay, so final thoughts. Do I recommend these gimbals? Yes, they're both awesome. If you have no gimbal at all and you're looking for your first purchase and you can afford either of them, then they're going to give you about as many features and as good a performance as anything else on the market will, especially at this size. Now, should you purchase the RSC2 instead of the RS2 if budget is a concern? I would say yes, as long as you can live with the limitation. Remember, you cannot remove the battery, you don't have the touchscreen feature, you don't have the ability to control ActiveTrack from the touchscreen. You don't have the ability to do time-lapse without attaching your phone. And of course, if you have an absolutely massive rig like a Canon C300 or something, then you're going to want to go for the bigger gimbal, because if you can afford a C300, you should probably be able to afford this gimbal. Now, what if you already own the Ronin SC? What are the reasons to upgrade to the Ronin SC2? In my eyes, the main reasons to upgrade would be more controllability from the handle. You can control a lot more functions without using the app, so if you need advanced functions, that's good. And it can balance heavier lenses. It can balance longer configurations. The original Ronin SC had these little arms that couldn't always balance the lens and the camera that I wanted to put on it. The SC2 has a lot more capacity in that regard. So those are the main reasons I would say to upgrade from the SC to the SC2, but if neither of those things bother you, then you just have to ask yourself, how much do you want this bendy handle? How much do you want the RavenEye system as an optional accessory? And how much do you want the increased payload capacity? What if you already own the Ronin S? Should you upgrade to the RS2? Well, in my opinion, that's a no-brainer, because when I used the Ronin S, I felt like my back was breaking. And when I use the RS2, I feel a lot more comfortable, like I can shoot all day. In fact, I didn't notice that much of an operational difference in the way my body felt using either of these gimbals, because the weight difference between them is not very much at all, and the size difference is not that much. So I felt just as comfortable using this as I felt using the RSC2. So if ergonomics are an issue for you, if back pain is an issue for you, then definitely upgrade. If you want more versatility with that universal base mount, upgrade. If you want the touchscreen, if you want the ActiveTrack that you can control with the touchscreen, if you want the advanced focus wheel, then upgrade. If none of those things matter to you, and if you don't care about the carbon fiber construction, you don't care about the increased payload, then yeah, I guess maybe you don't need to upgrade. But in my opinion, if I had the Ronin S, I would upgrade to this, because it's just a far, far more capable gimbal. And final thoughts, of these two gimbals, which one would I use more on my shoots? Well, it's definitely the RS2, because it's about the same size and weight as the RSC2, and it has just a whole lot more features. So I hope this review has helped you make up your mind about which gimbal you want to go for, if either of those fit the bill. And if not, just remember that whatever you use, it should inspire you to get out there and shoot more, because the only way we get better as filmmakers is by creating more content. So thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, click that notification bell so you find out about my next video, and I'll see you next time.